Okay, it's great to see so many people already joining, and I'm going to keep watching the waiting room so that I can let people in.
Great.
Thank you for joining us for one more online part to the bone as we head into the fall and winter season. And today we're going to be having Oz Helligman as the guest presenter. I'm Sean Eustace, your usual host. And Oz has some ideas, thoughts about Twelfth Night, and a bunch of other things that have to do with gender fluidity and love and gender and
all that fun stuff. All that fun stuff.
So I'm going to go ahead and let her just I'm going to let them take over so that we can actually have
all right,
and go for it. It's your floor, and we'll do some discussion afterwards, probably.
Cool. Great. So I'm going to try to keep my bit as brief as I can so we can have some discussion here. First off, I do know that there are a few people here that aren't like big on the Shakespeare scene, so I just want to like check, is everybody here generally familiar with the plot of Twelfth Night? No, Beth is not. We got yes, okay. Catherine.
But I did have opened my window so I could check anything if you said something. So I went to Google search.
I do have a brief synopsis. It's a very brief synopsis, but it is there just in case some folks needed a refresher. So if you would like me to go ahead and do that, I can. If not,
let's go ahead and go with a brief refresher.
All right, great. Let's do that then. Okay, so I'm going to be focusing on the main plot here as it pertains to this discussion. So the main plot, shamelessly stolen from the Royal Shakespeare Company's website. Viola has been shipwrecked on the coast of Illyria, believes her identical twin brother, Sebastian, was killed in the wreck. With few options in a foreign country, she disguises herself as a young man under the name Cesario. She gets a job as a servant for the Duke Orsino. She falls in love with him, but she can't confess her feelings because she's in disguise. Meanwhile, Orsino is in love with this Countess Olivia. However, she's in mourning and she's not accepting any suitors right now. Orsino sends Cesario to woo Olivia on his behalf. However, Olivia winds up falling in love with the disguise with Cesario instead. So we have Viola, who's in love with Orsino. Orsino is in love with Olivia, and Olivia is in love with Cesario / Viola. To complicate things further, the audience eventually finds out that Sebastian did in fact survive the shipwreck. He's been wandering around waiting for the plot to catch up with him. It eventually does because he encounters Olivia, and because he is Viola's identical twin brother, she mistakes him for Cesario, and then she asks him to marry her. He's confused, but ultimately agrees. Eventually, some hijinks ensue, a lot of misunderstandings, and then the twins are reunited, Viola reveals her identity, and the love triangle is resolved into two couples with Sebastian and Olivia, and Viola and Orsino. So that's there's more to it than that, but that's the basic synopsis. Sorry, I did not realize he was in here. I did not realize he was in here. Just gonna let him out real quick. So looking at Twelfth Night from a queer perspective, I have a couple of bullet points in I have a little slideshow here that if we can do screen share, I would
totally can do screen sharing.
You don't think we can, or
you can?
Oh, I can. Haha.
Don't think
there it is. Sharing screen. See if I can full screen this. Oh gosh, it's been so long since I've done a PowerPoint presentation.
I know.
Oh, there we go. There it goes. Haha. So, 12th Night from a queer perspective. If all the world's a stage, then gender is an elaborate performance. This is true in both theater and in real life. It is a common theme in Shakespeare's plays. If anybody's seen or read As You Like It, it's very prominent there too. And as is commonly known by most folks, theater goers today, in Shakespeare's time, women were not allowed on the theater. So all the female roles were played by men. And that's a part of what makes trouser roles so funny, because it is a man playing a woman playing a man, yada, yada, yada. So one thing that's very interesting about Twelfth Night, and I do want to thank Lauren Romagnano for pointing out this quote to me. It's from the book Shakespeare and How to Cure It. And it basically, I could pull up the quote, but to say, there it is. As regards to teaching the play, Stephen Booth points out, Twelfth Night is universally admired, but its admirers have never much cared to say why. The play is both celebrated as one of Shakespeare's most joyous comedies and one of his most melancholy. Why is that? The answer is because it's the gay one. Now, I'm not kidding when I say this, because so much of the queer experience, and I'm using queer as an umbrella term here, because the queer community has a lot outside of same-sex attraction. And to be a part of the queer community is often full of tragedy and distress and doubt. However, the community as we know it is also renowned for its colorful, both literally and figuratively, personality, and also lost my train of thought there. And also it's got so much humor, and it's about love. And Twelfth Night has all of this. It starts with these twins thinking that the other is dead. They have lost their other half. And the plot itself is very queer for the, in the obvious sense that it involves its heroine dressing up as a man, and it has women falling in love with women, and Orsino and Cesario have this relationship that's also has this homoerotic context. So we're going to go into that a little bit more in depth. We're going to start with the heroine, Viola. So I wanted to start with this question: is Viola a woman in disguise, or is Cesario her more authentic self? Does she identify as both a woman and a man? I would argue that yes, she does. From a meta context, she only appears as a woman in her first scene when she is at her lowest point. She's just washed up in this wreck. She thinks her entire family is dead. And from then on, she is Cesario. And unlike a lot of other trouser roles that involve women disguising themselves as men, there's usually a scene where the woman comes out in woman's regalia. Again, As You Like It has this, most famously, even with Rosalind coming out in the end to give a speech about it. But Viola doesn't do that. Her revelation is, first of all, she reveals herself very specifically to reunite with her brother. That is what that revelation is about. It is not to resolve the love triangle. That's just a happy side effect of her coming out, as it were. I would like to look a little bit at Viola's monologue from Act 2. It's a pretty famous one. If we could have somebody else read it for me, so it's not just me talking this whole time. If anybody would like to, they may.
Anybody want to volunteer? If I get no volunteers, I'll do it. Liana, I see you popping up.
Liana,
Go for it.
Go ahead.
Disguise I seek, thou art the wickedness, or in the pregnant enemy does much. Humble the fetch, my master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she mistaken seems to build on me. What will become of this? As I am a man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alas the day, what thriftless sighs shall poor Olivia breathe? Oh, time, thou must untangle this, not I. It was too hard not for me, don't I?
So thank you so much, Leon. That was lovely. Love that rhythm. So this is an interesting speech. There are some lines that I had to cut out for the sake of space, but one thing that I notice, and some of this, there are multiple interpretations for how you can take this speech. I would say the most straightforward interpretation is, at least in Disguise I See Thou Art a Wickedness, it's a condemnation of women's frailty. And yes, that is a valid interpretation, but I like the gay one better, because I like to interpret this as, it started out as a disguise, but it has become her life now. And it's not, there's more complicated elements, and she could very easily just tell the truth at any point in this play. Nothing is stopping her. And she doesn't. There could be many reasons as to why she doesn't. Maybe it's fear. Maybe she thinks she'll be cast out, or maybe she just doesn't want to. And I love the line at the end, "Time, thou must untangle this, not I." And again, it's interesting because she is seen as one of the most proactive heroines in Shakespeare. But if you think about it, she just kind of rolls with the punches here. And that's another element I wanted to point out, is calling herself a poor monster. To me, this reads as queer self-loathing, this I don't know what I am. I am neither a woman nor a man. I am a monster now. And I think another thing that is interesting is she connects, as I am a man, my state is desperate for my master's love. She connects her love of Orsino to her identity as Cesario. And she connects her confusion with Olivia's love with her womanhood. So these are just some interesting things that I took note of, and I'm going to keep going.
Yeah,
so I do
have an appreciation for her continuing to struggle with the uncomfortableness of this place for both Olivia and for Orsino. And it's a wonderful little bit of, I'm not comfortable, but I don't see myself being less uncomfortable if I reveal.
Yes.
So the struggle
exactly.
continues, and I love that.
Yes. And speaking of Orsino, let's talk about him for a bit. Duke Orsino. So one thing that I find very fascinating about him is that he is comically bad with women, even by the standards of Elizabethan men. He has such a poor understanding of them. He doesn't understand. I didn't put it in here, but he's got a line about how there's no woman could have love for me as much as I love Olivia. They can't. They're not capable of it. Now again, you could chalk this up to Elizabethan sexism. I also like to think of it as, I think he has this disconnect with women. And I think he's confused his physical attraction for Olivia for romantic attraction. Because I think, and also the qualities of Olivia that he highlights, of course, her beauty, that's a no-brainer. But also, I think there's one bit, I also have my Riverside Shakespeare in here for looking up some other little quotes here. But there's a quote in which he admires her loyalty to her brother, and her loyalty over, because she's made this decision to mourn for 7 years in honor of her brother and her father. He says, wow, she has such loyalty to her brother and her father. Imagine she could be just as loyal to me if she had a husband. And I don't know how to explain this to you, buddy, but that's just not how women work, or anybody works, really. And then you have his interactions with Cesario, which are where the two can meet on they have this wavelength where even though he does not know that she's actually a woman in disguise, they have a camaraderie, and they understand each other in a way that he could never understand Olivia. Now, I love the end of the play so much because even after Viola's identity is revealed, he still calls her a boy, and he still calls her Cesario. And in in the final line of the play, which is one of my favorite lines, Cesario, come, for so you shall be while you are a man. But when in other habits you are seen, Orsino's mistress and his fancy's queen. Now, to me, this comes across as we are not done with Cesario by any stretch of the imagination. I think just because she has revealed herself to her brother, I think Orsino understands that Cesario is still a part of who she is. And just because of how she was born, that doesn't mean Cesario doesn't exist anymore and that he's not there. And to me, this is an indictment of gender fluidity in and of itself. And it comes back to gender as a costume, as a performance. When she is wearing men's clothes, she is a man. When she is wearing women's clothes, she is a woman. And he just understands it so well in a way that's kind of surprising for a man who doesn't understand women. If there are any comments here, Sean, looks like you got something to say.
Oh, I could talk
Oh,
forever
talk to me,
about this play on
please.
so many levels.
Oh, please.
So yeah, one of the other things I do realize that for all his faults, Orsino does have this overly developed sense of romantic love. And I think he extends that sense of romantic love to people he would call his brothers or male friends, or basically bro love.
Yes.
So I think there's a revelation to him at the end that this bro love that he has for his fellow man, i.e. Valentine Curio, also extends to Cesario. And so that he understands that the same love that he had for Cesario as a bro is a basis for the love that he will have for Viola.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I love that.
Just, it's just one of those things that, like, I think he's a character that grows a little bit.
Oh, yes.
More than some others that have shown up in Shakespeare's plays.
Yeah, he shows some interesting growth for a character who he's not very active. His most of the play he's sending Cesario as a gopher.
Yeah, sending messages, he's having parties, he's having servants attend him.
But as his talks with Cesario continue, he does grow. And to me, I think also because, in this time period, they don't have the labels and the terminology that we do today. So I like to think of Duke Orsino as he is a bisexual man who does not know how to articulate it. It hasn't quite clicked yet. And there's another character who I think has a very similar dilemma, and that is Olivia. Oh, Olivia. A woman who's at the beginning of the play has made a declaration that in honor of the deaths of her father and brother, she will abjure the company of men for 7 years. Now that is a lovely sentiment, and even in the world of the play, this is excessive. I'm not going to discount her love for her family here. I think that definitely contributes to her state right now. However, we know in the context of the play that her brother at least has been dead for a year. Now, her father and brother have been dead for about a year now. She's had several months, and it could still be hitting her hard, but 7 years is a lot. And also, if you consider this sort of time period, 7 years is a lot. is going to take a great toll on the face here, and her biggest asset as a marriageable woman. So I think there is a potential that she's very uninterested in marriage to a man, and her mourning is, again, legitimate. I'm not going to discount it. However, I do think that there's a little side, a little bit of what's happening on the side, that two things cannot also be true. That she could be a abjuring company of men because she just doesn't want to deal with men hitting on her. Of course, we get, and I'm gonna talk about Olivia's attraction to Cesario for a little bit, because for a woman who has decided not to have any romance for 7 years, she breaks that very quickly with Cesario, and that's a part of the comedy here. But before that, I do want to talk about this. There's a little quote here from Act 1, Scene 5 at the top, if we could have another reader. If not, it's fine, I can read it. Oh, we got Abigail. Please read it.
Your lord does know my mind. I cannot love him. Yet I suppose him virtuous, know him noble, of great estate, of fresh and stainless youth, in voices well divulged, free, learned, and valiant, and in dimension and the shape of nature a gracious person, but yet I cannot love him.
I think this is it's a small quote. It's not one that I've thought too much about in the past, but when I was rereading the play, I just noticed that Orsino, in theory, has everything she could possibly want out of a marriage. He's handsome, he's young, he's charming, he's learned, valiant. He's got everything that you could possibly want in the Elizabethan man, and yet she cannot love him, and she doesn't once bring up her mourning as her reasoning here. She actually doesn't even seem like she has an explanation as to why she can't. She doesn't seem like she knows. And to me, I just find this interesting, because this is very much the kind of self-questioning that I have seen so many queer women go through. There's a term for it. It's called compulsory heterosexuality, but we'll get into that bit later. But there's this, she has no idea why not, but then she sees this beautiful feminine young man, and boom, it's done. She's fallen for him. And and in her little bit after Cesario leaves, she's describing his facial features and his mannerisms, which are either androgynous or feminine, or a bit of both. So we can see that she's not attracted to masculinity. She's very much attracted to femininity. And be that as it may, you could argue that she is sapphic or lesbian, but there's this one little thing about that, and that is Sebastian. And I have a question that I have no answer for, because I truly don't know. What are we to take from her marriage to Sebastian? Is this supposed to be funny? Is this supposed to be romantic? Is it supposed to be both? How do we interpret this in a way that is, especially in a contemporary production? And that's just a question that I would like to throw out to all you folks here.
This opens up a whole nother can of worms, though, because
yes, it does.
Have the whole Sebastian Antonio thing.
I do have that in my next slide.
I'm sure it's coming up later. So
yes, it is.
There's a whole thing where that she has, well, first of all, it's twin.
Mm-hmm.
There's that. So the looks are more or less the same in so many ways. And so is their mannerism, so is their speaking. And so and I don't think they would have had so much doubling as to have Sebastian and Cesario being played by the same person, because I think they are on at the same time at the end.
Yes, they are.
But, you know, her marriage to Sebastian it's a little bit of both, that Olivia is getting what she wants out of a man who she finds some attraction to. And unfortunately, it's not quite a bed trick.
Yeah.
But it is questionable. It's like, okay, well, he's into it. He's surprised by it, but he's into it. So it's not illegitimate.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I think is really funny on Sebastian's end when he goes along with this, and it's that he thinks he's either gone insane or is dreaming. He's like, so he is not in. He is so. I feel like both of them are operating under very different wavelengths.
He is also questioning his own expectations and brains,
Yes.
as well as what's going on with Olivia. So they're both questioning their own sanity, but I don't know, it seems to work out.
Yeah, and with that, I do want to talk about Sebastian a little bit, or more specifically, Sebastian's traveling companion, Antonio. Because, oh boy. So
here we go.
From a meta standpoint, Sebastian's purpose in the play is to be the heterosexual alternative to Cesario, so that we can have that comedy ending with everybody paired up. Now, that's all well and good, but why the hell is Antonio here? Antonio, and from a standpoint, Antonio's role in the play is he's another point of confusion of the mistaken identities, because there's a bit where he loans Sebastian some money, and later when he's asking for his money back, he's talking to Cesario, who is not the same person, has never met this person before, and that leads to some confusion and hijinks. And that's all well and good, but Antonio has some unambiguously romantic lines with regards to Sebastian. So much so I have them separated from the rest of my script here. One of the classic ones. The gentleness of all the gods go with thee. I have many enemies in Orsino's court, else I would very shortly see thee there. But come what may, I do adore thee so that danger shall seem sport, and I will go. So that line on its own, yeah, okay, you could maybe see it, but it goes further. As it continues further, Antonio meeting up with Sebastian, I could not stay behind you. My desire, more sharp than filed steel, did spur me forth. And not all love to see you, though so much as might have drawn one to a longer voyage. And it goes on up into like one of his final lines in the play here, where when asked, when came he, Sebastian, to this town? Antonio responds, today, my lord. And for 3 months before, no interim, not a minute's vacancy, both day and night did we keep company. Okay. So another thing about Antonio is that he is described by other characters as a pirate. And from a historical context, pirates have this reputation as being, well, not straight. To say the least. There's a whole lot, that's a whole different topic that I don't have time to go into today, but pirates in general, if you've seen the show Our Flag Means Death, that show goes into it in more detail. But so we have so there's a lot of coding here with Antonio as a pirate, constantly declaring love for Sebastian. There's a bit even in one of his scenes where when he's asked, what man are you? Antonio's response is, one for whose love I would do more than you may have heard him brag to you he will, him being Sebastian. And to me, this mirrors Viola at the end of the play when Olivia asks, where goes Cesario? Her response is, after him I love, who I love more than life, than more than all mores than e'er I shall love wife. I think that's the general quote here. And to me, these lines very much parallel each other, because Antonio also has this servant-like role to Sebastian, and in a similar way that Viola does to Orsino. And so the relationship very strangely parallels Antonio and Sebastian. Their relationship very strangely parallels that of Viola and Orsino. And so when we get to Sebastian and Olivia's marriage to each other, yes, it is 100% an accident, but it could also be considered a happy accident, because from a societal standpoint, they are both married, and they have fulfilled that obligation. But there's also some freedom to branch out from there. To use a modern term, they can be each other's beards. And so that's one interpretation. That's my personal favorite interpretation, but there's some interesting context there's some interesting elements with Antonio, because hearkening back to what I was mentioning earlier about this play being considered one of Shakespeare's more melancholy, Antonio has a lot to do with that, because where the four main lovers embody this chaotic and humorous side of love, and especially queer love, Antonio more embodies this somber side. Depending on the production, his love could be unrequited or unseen. At the end, he does get arrested, and at least in the copy of the script that has survived to this day, they don't really address that at the end. By all intents and purposes, he is still under arrest because there hasn't been anything specifically written to resolve that. So there could be a valid interpretation of the text where Antonio does remain imprisoned, or does remain in prison by the end of the show while everybody else gets this happy ending. It's possible also that Sebastian would have spoken up for him and that he would have gotten pardoned. And if pardoned, is he going to go back to his ship, or is he going to stay in Illyria? There's a lot that's left out in the open that isn't entirely answered, that there's a lot to play with. And because this is theater, there are so many interpretations and so many different takes on how you could, on what a production could do with this. And it all depends on what you're going for. If you want to embrace the more melancholy elements of the play, there's room for that, but there's also room for, again, hearkening back to there is room for Sebastian and Antonio to continue their relationship with Antonio as his servant, as it were. So those are the main elements here that I wanted to address. If there's any discussion left, I'm on time. I'm doing well on time, and that's
You're doing fine. You're doing great. I always have something to say about everything. So,
please.
I'm going to give you two things for this. Is one, there was a whole Shakespearean Elizabethan thing about having a person employed in your household, and then they would have your livery, and then they would be protected the same way that you would be. So with Sebastian marrying into Olivia's household, there is now a household. He could totally say, Antonio, you're my man, and I will help to pardon you for your crimes or whatever. He could totally do that.
Yes.
The other thing I want to go ahead and interject into there is Shakespeare was very much into Greek concepts. He ripped things from Greek tragedies, from ideas from other plays. sometimes whole cloth. And he absolutely adored what he was able to do with that. And I was just realizing, again, there's like about 8, maybe more ancient Greek words for love of different types. And they had these words. So in this play, you have the romantic, passionate one, the affectionate love, selfless, universal love, familial love, the obsessive, playful, enduring, and self-love, which are all done here. And then I'm going to keep my mouth shut about, and no, not, is it Antonio that you're considering as melancholy?
Yes, I would.
Yeah, and I think also somewhat Orsino as well. And I have a whole nother thing that I want to actually do one day about the definition of Shakespeare's melancholy, and that it doesn't necessarily always mean sad.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother. That's a whole nother.
Oh yeah. That's a can of beans right there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at some of the comments in our chat here, and I just want to shout out to some of the folks in the chat here for some wonderful commentary.
Yeah. Mostly agreements about piracy. Sebastian has maybe not so mask as people say, and the entire thing. Oh, she that hath a heart of fine frame to pay this debt of love, but to a brother. How is she loved when the rich golden shaft hath killed the flock of all affection? Elves that live in her, when liver, brain, and heart, these sovereign thrones are all supplied, and filled her sweet perfections with one self king.
Thank you so much, Liana.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you for that. Because I mean, we got a crowd here that's probably already been thinking about this. So thank you for codifying and
yes,
helping us to go, yeah, I wasn't wrong, was I? Okay, I'm not the only one. So
okay, great.
What do we got?
Yes, we have to. We got to shout out to Melancholy Jacques. But yeah, so we do have, so because we have enough time, I do want to talk a little bit about some bonus content that I have not had the opportunity to mention before, and that is the Malvolio subplot. So the Malvolio subplot, long story short, Malvolio is an uppity stick in the mud servant who some other comedic relief, they come up with a prank. They make him think that Olivia is super into him and that he should come to her dressed up in yellow stockings and cross-gartered, and he makes a big fool out of himself and then gets thrown in the madhouse. And then comes back, he comes back, and eventually that's all sorted out. That's the long and short of it. Now, in some contemporary interpretations of this subplot, some tend to take it in a bit of a mean-spirited direction, pointing out that Malvolio gets tossed into a madhouse, which is terrible. That is a terrible thing to do to somebody. After all that, and so I've seen productions where at the final scene when Malvolio comes out, he's wearing rags, he's dirty, and he just looks so pitiful. And I feel like, not that, and again, I don't want to say that these interpretations are not valid, but I would like to bring in a little bit of a historical context here. Because Malvolio there's a scene where the other comic characters, Mariah, Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, they're all talking about Malvolio, and they keep calling him a Puritan. Now, fun fact about the Puritans, they did not get along with theater, famously so. Now, to the point where they even successfully destroyed the globe in 1644, which is probably about 30 years after this was written or maybe performed, unclear. But even so, Puritans were vocally against theater. And so it is not beyond the stretch of imagination to imagine that Shakespeare might have had some friction with the Puritans. Now, if you consider Malvolio as a representative of Puritans, the Valvolio subplot has a very different context to it because, well, of course, in addition to being against the theater, Puritans have a puritanical, as you might say, view on sexuality and marriage. So the scene where Malvolio shows up dressed in this loud, obnoxious, revealing outfit is to me, that comes across as very much a queer revenge fantasy, or even or not even a queer revenge fantasy, just a revenge fantasy in general. You know, it's the equivalent of getting, oh gosh, I need to think of I got to think of a modern analogy that's not horrible. But you know, it's like getting a you know, what are your, it's like you know, like if you know a very strict Catholic man and then tricking him into dressing in drag on display. That's sort of what this is akin to. And also the play is very wishy-washy on how time works. I mean, it definitely does take place over the course of 3 months, but where certain events take place within these 3 months is up for debate, and definitely questionable. But from my perspective, I like to think that Malvolio was not in the madhouse for that long, because I feel like otherwise the rest of the comedic relief would have gotten bored with it. Because there's a whole bit where they play with him some more while he's in the madhouse. So that's just a fun little addendum that I thought if I had time to talk about, I would. Going to the chat here.
Yeah.
Yes.
That the gulling of Malvolio, where you feel bad for him.
You do.
You like, not only are they teasing him for dressing in something where he finally feels free in some way, although there's the constriction of the legs and all that stuff, but
yes,
it's something he's doing because he thinks people will approve of. And then after that, they also use the whole get him to say his prayers, all these, you know, puritanical things that he would supposedly be doing.
Yes.
And they use that, his refusal of that, to go, well, he should be locked up in, and I don't know that he's actually in a madhouse as much as
or is he in a dark room?
He's in a dark room, but he thinks it's a madhouse, and that's bad enough.
Yeah.
And they think that Sir Topus has visited him, and also Feste, and just, I mean,
yes,
it's this close to torture.
It is.
And it's, you know, is as a modern, it's not, you don't have as much queerness as it, but it's Carrie, I think, is the story. You have, I'm finally being accepted into a society, and then they're going to put me on a pedestal and then dump a bucket of blood on me.
Yeah.
And it's in that way, it is mentally horrific to have this, I'm finally being accepted. Oh, wait, I'm not. They were just teasing me in the entire time. So if you want to put your head in that headspace for Malvolio, that's the, you know.
Yeah. And yes, and as is the case with, you know, so many other things that I've talked about, there's so many different ways to take it, so many different directions. And
such a, you know, I know you want to change and be one of us, but you know, it's a torturous, you stay in your lane thing. And it's, you know,
it's I don't necessarily agree that he feels I don't necessarily agree with in that scene that it's empowered, that he feels freed by it. I think because in general, so much of what Malvolio does, everything he does is calculated in his plan to move up.
Yeah.
So, you know, and even his, you know, courting Olivia, you know, maybe it is a part of that is attraction, but most likely it is a status thing. So, I think it could also be an alternative interpretation here is it could also be seen as condemning him for trying to climb.
That too.
Yeah,
He's a
might be
complicated
the only way
character.
he can get any sleep in that house.
Yeah. He's a complicated character. And I love watching people give him his due for how difficult it is to find that space.
Yeah, it is and one thing again, whatever was intended with the Malvolio subplot is kind of irrelevant here, because what matters is what productions do with it today. I also do just wanted to shout out to Abigail Fung. Is there a version where Malvolio could be seen as the bully that picks on others because he's repressed himself? I would love to see that. Yes. I like to see, because the way I perceive the Malvolio subplot, because I feel like there's because this is a comedy, and because so much of the subplot has to do with all the comedy characters, it is a very strange turn. Sorry. Oh gosh, I'm distracted by all of these.
I'm just going to go ahead and read this out, unless
go ahead.
Unmute and be part of this.
Sure. I can join the conversation.
Oh, please do.
Actually, is your PowerPoint finished, or do you
yes, it's done. It is done.
Okay, go ahead and unshare. Let's go ahead and open this up.
Yeah, sure.
I think we're in the discussion part.
Oh gosh, how do I unshare this? Oh,
so while Oz
is
figuring that out, I was just gonna say, if we look at the idea of Malvolio, being the bully that picks on others because he's himself repressed in his own queerness. If we're looking at Twelfth Night as being the queer play, then let's make everybody queer. Let's take a look at that. Let's see what happens when everybody's queer. When he has the garters scene where he comes out and he's performing heteronormativity and performing heterosexuality, then it could be freeing for him to have the garters and how be dressed in a way that is more akin to how he wants to be dressed, but then he's mocked for it in a way that shoves him further into the dark room that is then his closet. He puts that toe out there, tries to express himself in a way that he perhaps has wanted to, or in a way that he perhaps sees Olivia as accepting. And then he's punished for it. And I'm not saying, he does do awful things over the course of the play. I'm not, trying to, save him, but I think it could be interesting if, he's the bully because he's scared to be himself. And then he tries for a second, and then he's, rightfully punished for the bad things he's done. But we still have him in the dark closet, being pushed into the closet again.
I love that interpretation.
That's a really fascinating interpretation that I hadn't thought of. So I guess in short, we need to uncover Shakespeare's sequel to Twelfth Night, Malvolio's Revenge. If anybody figures out time travel at any stage, or we can just write it ourselves, right?
Let's just write a sequel. We're definitely good
Malvolio's Revenge.
Yeah, I think that's actually a modern written play. Somebody actually did that.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Which is,
okay.
Beth, you got something?
Yes, I have a quick question. Recently, I got the July issue of Scotland magazine, and it had an article called "The King and the Playwright" about James I and Shakespeare. And James I went to great trouble to show his true love and devotion to Anne of Denmark, and everybody thinks that was a cover for him being gay and wanting to be King of England. Could Malvolio possibly be a little hint from Shakespeare saying, hey, we know who you are, you're going to be king real soon, if not already by the time the play's out, so it's cool, we can work with it here?
Yeah, It's possible. I mean, I know there are also some theories that suggest that Olivia is based there are some theories that Olivia is based on Queen Elizabeth, which I would argue, if so, that's a bit of a strange interpretation.
Well,
But
there are many strange things with relationships in this play.
that
It
is
seems
true.
more ancient Egyptian than anything else, because with brother and sister being twins, yes, no, no, yes, you're going, are they really from a pharaoh family or something like that, where everybody married their brothers and sisters and had tons of children that became pharaohs that we look in their tombs nowadays?
I will say, not to promote things that I didn't think I would say today, but not to promote incest. It's not beyond the stretch of an imagination to see the four couples have the four main lovers having some sort of polycule situation at the end. Again, not promoting incest here.
Not to promote it, but I noticed we do have the mention of the Tanzan Grieg Malvolio, which is extra fascinating if you haven't seen it.
Which one
and
is that, John?
But
That was
it had a female Malvolio. So a female Malvolio kind of coming out of the closet of courting Olivia was a liberated moment, because it was a moment of acknowledgement of the same gender, and it was most definitely framed as the finding of one's voice, which of course makes the further torture shenanigans all that much more pointy, because
And I will go ahead and give a shout out to Avant Bard, who just before the pandemic did a queer-eyed, sorry, I'm starting to lose words again.
Oh no,
they did a
I've
queer-eyed
been doing
version
that
of
all
it.
day.
And their Malvolio did actually go from being a very strict pinstriped suit-wearing assistant to getting up in drag and wearing the wig.
Yeah.
And during the gulling of it, you hear Mariah, just before things get to a head, she just says, "This is wrong," before she stops the entire process. But it's already wrecked, Malvolio. And at the end, actually, there also was a indication that there was going to be a polycule between Cesario, Viola, and Orsino.
Yeah.
all right. I mean, Olivia offers to have a joint wedding for all of them that she'll pay for.
Yeah.
Let's have
Yeah,
one
I know.
wedding.
Yeah, that was that was something I forgot to mention. But yes, thank you so much for pointing that out. But yes, she says to Orsino, they like to think of me as a sister as well as a wife. Which okay, Shakespeare.
So the interpretation is there to play. I mean, it's backed by the text, and you can also do it completely straight. But looking at this through this lens is definitely a worthwhile exercise. And I thank you so much, Oz, for bringing your thoughts.
Yeah, and I forgot to include that this slide when I was sharing my screen, but I did put a little disclaimer in the front that said, as is the case with most works, especially Shakespeare, there exist many different interpretations of the text, and this is but one of them. I think that's a pretty good note to sort of put sort of a period to put on this one.
This is a great start to having people think about this and what else we might have seen in other plays. I mean, you've got other cross-dressing in other plays, such as You Like It. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting.
As You Like It, Merchant of Venice, Two Gentlemen of Verona. Oh wow, that was a face about two gems.
So you're basically saying that it doesn't matter what century it's in, it's basically just simply Hollywood trying to do a production and sell their idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with Twelfth Night, what I find so unique about Twelfth Night is the way that it handles the cross-dressing trope. Just because there's something that's kind of it's almost undescribable about how how this play perceives love and gender. Because I also think it's very interesting how the play simultaneously condemns love based on love based on physical appearance, and it also endorses it with Olivia and Sebastian. And I feel like that's another element that could kind of play into a queer reading of the text.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to me talk in a fugue state as I desperately try to get my conspiracy theory off the board.
Thank you so much for presenting. And just to let people know, because Baltimore Shakespeare is going to have their mini 12th night starting the weekend before and of Labor Day. So August 27th through September 5th up in Angel Park. There are also several other companies doing 12th night, such as Spotlighters and Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. So if you miss this one, you've got other chances. Go see what they do.
And in theory, if you want to see my take on Antonio done further, you can check out Chesapeake Shakespeare Company's production this coming fall. So,
may I say one thing for teachers and educators?
Oh, please.
If you haven't read it, please do get a copy of Death by Shakespeare by Catherine Harkup.
Well, I'm gonna write
and
that
basically
one down.
It's great for across the curriculum classroom because it talks about the literature, but it also talks in depth about how people were killed in those days related to how they were killed in the Shakespeare plays. So you can do the historical part as well as the science part. So it's something where you might be able to get somebody who would say, I'm never going to a play in my life, to go, oh, they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And become interested and maybe want to go to the play, and vice versa, somebody who goes to plays and never thought about doing the history or the science of it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just looking it up right now. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, it's excellent. And she also did another one called A is for Arsenic, and how Agatha Christie killed everybody.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, no, 8 o'clock. We
8 o'clock.
did this right on the dot. I feel so accomplished.
We're doing so well. We tend to have these like happen, and like we're ending right on the hour for most of these, and that's about how much time most people have attention span for. So
yeah, funny how that is.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you also so much for showing, and
thank you.
Don't forget to visit the website. Go ahead and see 12th Night, and if you can, also look at our Patreon, because that's what's funding this, as well as other things for continued operations. And we will see you at the theaters.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one. And if you want to chat more about this, DM me. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.